Sarkeesian and crew just finished up hosting the bulk of their major targets for the 2023 class. The past 2 weekends have seen top offensive and defensive guys from the state of Texas and around the nation. Recruiting aficionado Justin Wells of Inside Texas stops by to give us the lowdown. Inside Texas is the place to go to stay on top of everything recruiting, and they have an awesome promo running where you can get 4 months for only $1. Take advantage of the deal and sign up today at InsideTexas.com. No time to waste. Let's get a glimpse into the next wave of players that can make a name for the Texas Longhorns. Without further ado, let's get into it. Justin, always love having you on. And first, how is the coaching staff doing overall on visits? How's the ambiance? And are we seeing a little more aggression in closing guys early?
What we're seeing with this cycle is Steve Sarkeesian and his staff are becoming more comfortable with their surroundings. They're becoming more comfortable and settling in. You know, I talked to Harris Sewell after a visit a couple weekends ago, and he said, you know, I came by last year and it didn't seem disorganized, but you could just kind of tell everything was kind of jumbled together. And he said, you know, a year later, it looks like everybody settled in. He said it went from a, you know, kind of a transition to a winning atmosphere, and that, you know, that he noticed that. And I think that's what's going on with the staff. They're figuring out their bearings, you know, who they're close to, who they're not. Right now, this Texas class could probably take 3 or 4 guys that want to commit right now. But Sark is being judicious. He wants to make sure their culture fits. He wants to make sure, you know, everything is checked off, and they're in on some really elite guys. And so you don't want to fill up on bread before being able to, you know, try to notch some of those, you know, 5-star kids. And so, you know, Sark and those guys, they're comfortable in their own skin. They're very genuine. It really comes off with the players and the coaches. The fact that Sark is the primary contact on some of these recruits, to where it's a lot of his involvement is just with him, that really resonates with these recruits and the coaches and their parents. I think the vibe it's positive. That's what we hear from sources and from players and from prospects, and these guys like each other. This is a different culture. I talked to Josh Thompson the other day, and he went by practice, and he told me the vibe around practice reminded him of the 2018 season vibe when Texas and Sam Ehlinger went to the Sugar Bowl and beat Georgia. It was a 10-win season. He said it had a lot of that kind of feeling. And so I think this group is finally, you know, settled in. I think they understand what's going on, and they understand how many spots are in this class, and they're bringing in some of the best in the country, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Awesome, man. And let's talk about the most anticipated recruit and quarterback, Arch Manning. How'd his visit go, and what's his timeline looking like as of right now?
Well, as you know, college basketball is happening right now, but it's not March Madness. It's in Austin. It's Arch Madness. And I'm going to tell you something. It's a big deal. When you come to take an unofficial visit for 3 days on your own dime, I'm not sure I've seen that before. That was rare, but that's Arch Manning. That recruitment is rare. This is a different process than I've seen in a decade of doing this. And so Arch got the full treatment in Austin. Once again, there's just so much stuff to do. You know, they come in on Thursday evening, him and teammate Will Randall, the tight end from Isidore Newman. They go to the Texas Relays. They attend Dale Match Play, where they get to go watch a golf tournament. Texas ex Sam Ehlinger has actually been helping out in this regard. People don't realize how much Sam helped Texas get Quinn Ewers. And now he's focused on Arch Manning, because Sam Ehlinger wants Texas to be more successful than any person I've ever met. And then on Saturday, he gets to watch practice. Give Kyle Flood some credit. They brought in a handful of the 2022 O-line signees and a handful of the 2023 O-line targets. And I talked to each one of them after their visit. And essentially, they were there to show Arch Manning what his bodyguards would look like. This is what your pocket protection is going to look like. And so you have to think Texas is really playing chess while a lot of others are playing checkers, because they want to ensure him that he's going to be taken care of. And that also, you know, comes to this weekend's visits with Reuben Owens and Jonte Cook. You know, Jonte was there last weekend as well. And so they're showing Arch everything that's going to be available. They're selling him on the vision. Sark's selling him on the quarterback development, on the opening up of the offense, all the things that they can do with these schemes. And Arch Manning is the most popular recruit in this class, and he's going to be that way until he decides. I think Texas still leads this, especially after his visit. Now, he just left Alabama a couple days ago, and so we're still checking in to see how that visit went. But this is a 3-man race. It's Texas, Georgia, and Alabama, and I don't really think Alabama's in it. I think this is down to Texas and Georgia. Georgia. Alabama actually told quarterback Eli Holstein that he's their top target. So I actually anticipate Holstein probably committing to Alabama sooner than later. And then with Georgia, they've already offered a handful of other 2023 quarterbacks. So I think that kind of shows their hand a little bit. They're still in the mix. Don't get it twisted. Arch likes Athens, Georgia, but they're also looking around as well. Texas is the only school that's not looking at any other quarterbacks. They haven't offered any other quarterbacks. And I think that's also telling, because the staff knows they have to be prepared with contingencies. In the end, this recruitment's probably going to drag into the summer. He definitely wants to take a few of his official visits. I think we'll know more coming out of that, but I can't wait to go down to New Orleans in a couple of weeks when spring ball starts and to get to see him in person again and kind of get a feel from him. I talk to people around him all the time, but I kind of want to hear it from him. But at this point, I think Texas still leads, and that visit last weekend pretty much assured that.
Yeah, the amount of stuff going on in Austin that weekend was nuts. And then we have the big guys, like you mentioned. How's the offensive line recruiting coming together early on?
These offensive linemen, give Sark and Kyle Flood, I said it again. I'll say it again. They brought in the bodyguards to show Arch exactly what he would be looking at. You bring in Kelvin Banks, the number one offensive tackle in the country that signed, who's probably going to play as a true freshman. You bring in Connor Robertson, your nasty guard center type guy, interior guy that just plays nasty. And Cam Williams, I have never seen 6'7", 350 pounds look better. I just haven't. Cam Williams looks incredible. This offensive line group was just incredible that they brought in. And, the top rated offensive lineman in the state of Texas for 2023 off of the On3 recruiting rankings is Harris Sewell. Big 6'4". He looks about 6'5", 310 pound, barrel chested, Odessa Permian mojo made dude, man. Harris is a big kid. And like I said earlier, Harris wasn't, he was kind of feeling OU and Clemson and Notre Dame early on in his recruitment, but he's got a relationship with Arch Manning. Him and Arch, they stay in touch. And Kyle Flood needs a ton of credit because this recruit, he has done a tremendous job kind of shaping this recruitment. A year ago, I wouldn't have thought Sewell would be going to Texas. Now, I'd say it's probably 50-50. I think they've literally they've narrowed that margin there. And it's just so much to sell on that. Harris Sewell, like he told me, he's like, it feels like a winning atmosphere now. It feels like everybody's settled in. Everybody kind of knows their role. He said, everywhere I walked, everyone was nice to each other. He said, it's not like that at every place. Everybody was cool. Everybody was cordial. And he said, you really do feel that. It doesn't feel fake. It feels real. It feels authentic. My personal favorite offensive lineman of the class of 2023 in Texas is Jaden Chapman. He's a big kid, 6'4", about 285, 290 out of Harker Heights. He can play guard. He can play tackle. I think he's going to be a tackle at the next level. He's a guy he's made it known. Texas is a school that's squarely in the mix. He's been to Austin more than any other place. There's a couple schools that you got to watch for. Alabama offered him, I believe, in late January, early February. They're making a solid push. LSU's doing the same thing. Texas A&M is still interested in Chapman, as they are with Sewell as well. And so you have to be leery of what the Aggies are doing in College Station because they just put together the greatest recruiting class I've ever seen. I think they're in an incredibly good spot with Jaden Chapman right now. I think we could see a decision in the summer. I think they moved the needle with Harris Sewell. I think that's another one that's going to take a little bit longer. I think I can see him taking more officials in the summer and potentially into the fall. But, those two guys, in addition to Ian Reed from Austin Vandergrift coming on board, he's a Texas target. Connor Stroh, 6'7", 345 out of Frisco Wakeland. He's just a huge human. I mean, he's large. Andre Kojo, he's a 6'6", 345 guy. And so I think Kyle Flood's showing his hand. He loves size when it comes to the offensive line. And the fact that they're making moves with some of these guys, they just signed the best class in the country for 2022 in offensive linemen. They're going to try to one-up that with some of these guys. And so far, I feel like they've set the foundation.
And then running back is interesting because we likely lose Bajan and Roshan after the season. So who's the next group of targets to help replace those guys?
Like with other positions, I think the running back spot is a 2 running back class. Reuben Owens is at the top of the list. He's been at the top of the list when Tom Herman was here, and he's going to stay at the top of the list with Steve Sarkisian. Reuben is just the black unicorn. He'll tell you that. 6 foot, 200 pounds. He ran a 10, I believe a 10.6, 10.7, 100 a couple of weeks ago, and he was so proud of that. that. He's been working really hard on his speed, and he's just a big kid with he's a home run hitter type guy. Reuben Owens enjoys the recruiting process. He's been recruited since I've met him. And so I feel like sometimes he gets burned out on it, which is natural. I would too as well. And he's a well-traveled guy. He has seen a lot of this country in regards to college programs, and he still hasn't taken any official visits. And you have to know those are coming up. But I think Texas did another good job this weekend with him. His mother came in with this trip, and I think that's significant because I think with Reuben's father, I think Texas, obviously he doesn't care where Reuben goes, but I think, if he did pick Texas, his father wouldn't be disappointed at all. And so it's nice to see his mother in there and kind of get some of the recruitment process part of it as well. A&M is going to be a factor there. Georgia is going to be a factor there. I think LSU is trying to get him back. Syracuse, he keeps telling me he wants to visit Syracuse. USC, I am telling you right now, I think he is going to take an official visit to USC at some point because that old staff at OU, he built a nice rapport with those guys, with Lincoln Riley and those guys when they were in Norman, and it's extended to LA now. And so giving him a shot to go out there and take an official and see Los Angeles, I don't see him turning that down. And so with this recruitment, just stay buckled up. It's going to be bumpy in some stretches. It's going to be fast in some stretches, but just stay buckled up and stay tuned because this one's going to be a hard one to read. Yeah, he's a former Texas commit, and most of the times players don't recommit to the school they decommitted from. Yeah, and Quinn Ewers wasn't going to Texas either. So anything can happen in recruitment, and each one is different. If Reuben Owens is your running back one, Cameron Cook is your fantastic running back two. This is a guy that could be a running back one on a lot of programs, including schools like Utah and Northwestern. They're known for their early evaluations. Cam Cook's a local kid, Stony Point, Round Rock, Stony Point. His family, he's got family that went to the University of Texas. There's a little bit of a lure and a pull there. I think Cam Cook's is a dynamic type back. I think he's a guy that if you got a Reuben Owens and a Cam Cook, that's incredibly complimentary. If you could bring both those guys into the same cycle, Cam Cook's going to also feel like he's going to take his time. And with Cook, I feel like he's going to see a few other schools. Some Texas didn't come in late with that recruitment, but they weren't necessarily early. And Tashard Choice is playing a little bit of catch up, but they're making moves there with Choice. I know they really like Coach Choice, and I know that he's made an impression on that family and Cam as well, who came in this last weekend. And so from the running back position, Cedric Baxter just isn't likely. Justice Haynes, he's one that's probably not going to happen. But the likely ones, the ones that Texas is squarely in on, your Reuben Owens, your Cameron Cooks, your Javen Simpkins, those are guys that Texas fans need to be aware of because I feel like those are guys that are most likely to fill those two spots.
Good stuff, good stuff. And wide receiver needs some more depth, according to Sark from his pressers. Who are the major guys on the board at receiver right now?
The three amigos, Jonte Cook out of DeSoto, Jaquez Petaway out of Langham Creek, and then, of course, Jaden Greathouse from down the street at Austin Westlake. To me, those are the three top targets that Texas has really zeroed in on in their wide receiver core for 2023. I believe the take number is going to be 3. It could be 4, depending on the attrition from this roster. But right now, those seem like to be the 3 guys that Texas is really, really in on. With Jonte Cook and Petaway, they're both very similar receivers, both inside guys, both speed guys, quickness. Jonte is a human highlight reel. Every single time I go cover him, he does something I haven't seen before. It's going to be against Texas A&M. I feel like those are the 2 schools. Alabama and LSU are flirting. They're staying around. Ole Miss is trying to hang around the rim a little bit with Cook as well, but he's actually headed to A&M this coming weekend on April 9th for their spring game. And so from that recruitment, I think it's a Texas A&M battle. If you ask him, he would probably add a few more stools, but that's Jonte. Petaway is a freaking machine. He ran a 10.400 and a 20.8200 last week. Flying, man, that is absolutely flying. And so the emphasis is on speed. And now that Brennan Marion's in the mix, I actually think that helps Texas. I think, after signing Brennan Thompson last year, one of the fastest guys in the country, Brennan Thompson's just picking up where some of these guys left off. And with Petaway, it's one of those where his family grew up in Alabama, and I think he had some ties to Alabama, and I think that's a school that if Bama came in and were serious and offered him, I think they would be the immediate leaders, but they haven't. They've actually, they haven't offered him yet. I think that gives Texas a chance. He's, like I said, him and Cook are very similar. Petaway's a guy that he's going to take his visits. He's going to travel around. He's going to enjoy the process, but I think Texas did a good job this last weekend with him. I'm not sure if they moved the needle, but it's it's a legitimate interest there. Whereas it seemed more casual 6 months ago, today it seems more real. Cook and Petaway are two of the guys that I think are the two top guys that Texas just really has to have just because of what they add. And then with Greathouse, the main thing he kept telling me is he wants to watch Texas in practice. He wants to see how the players play, the coaches coach, how the players react to the coaching, the adjustments, the tempo, the intensity, everything I would expect Greathouse to want to see, the basics. Jaden breaks it down pretty simply. And this is a guy that, he's about to hit Clemson. He's about to hit South Carolina next weekend, he told me earlier. Texas is in the mix. OU is in the mix. Strangely, I think OU is kind of a sleeper in this recruitment. And then Notre Dame, they run a little hot and cold with Greathouse now. At the end of junior day, he had mentioned he wanted to have a decision by the summertime. And I asked him about that again the other day. And he said, yeah, the summertime, if not earlier. And so I think Jaden's starting, he's a very pragmatic guy. And I think he's starting to sort of narrow things down and sort things out. And I think Texas is going to be in the mix at the end. I have no doubt about that. It's going to be interesting to see how these other trips go and what he says when he comes back from these other visits, because I think you could see a commitment in early summertime from him. But I think Texas is still in a great spot. They may need to push just a little bit towards the end, but even Sark has told us, in the media, there's a handful of guys that could probably commit right now, but we don't want to push for the wrong guys. We want to make sure their culture fits. And Jaden Greathouse is the definition of a culture fit.
And then to round out the offense, let's look at tight end. And we didn't bring any out of the high school ranks last year. So who's Jeff Banks looking to pull in?
This is a 2 tight end class since they didn't sign any last year. Obviously, they brought in Jaleel Billingsley from Alabama as a transfer. He's going to play right away. And then you've got guys on campus like Gunnar Helm that's coming into a sophomore year. Jatavian Sanders looks tremendous going into his sophomore year. So the room definitely looks good, but they're going to need 2 in this 2023 cycle. And they've offered, at least it feels like a baker's dozen of these guys to kind of see where they are. The one that I think that they're in really good position with today is Will Randall, and that's Arch Manning's teammate at Isidore Newman. Will's got Alabama, he's got LSU, he's got SMU, he's got a handful of other schools of Miami that are interested in Randall's services. But right now, I think Jeff Banks and those guys have done the best job with Will. I don't put in a lot of RPMs, crystal balls of that sort, but I did put in one last week for Will Randall to Texas with a 70% percentage, just because everything I've heard from him and people close to him says, Texas is the school to beat in this recruitment. And so I don't want people to think, well, he's just following Arch. Well, he's just a throw-in. The kid can play. And if you don't think so, watch his basketball highlights as well. Newman won the state championship in basketball a couple months ago. Go watch his highlights there too as well. He's got some athleticism, and he's a big kid. He's a 6'4", 225 pound kid that can do both. He can block and catch. And with Jeff Banks, you're going to have to do both if you're going to play a lot in that system. Then in state, I think their top guy is probably Lafayette Cailway from Arlington Sam Houston. He's a big kid too, but he's more of a flex type. He's a 6'5", maybe 210, 215 type kid. Great hands, great demeanor, good kid, great parents. I think Texas actually led for him early on, but watch North Carolina. He made a trip to UNC, and I think he might actually go back because Mac Brown has really done what Mac Brown does. He's recruited him really well. He sold him on he can be the next Algie Crumpler or Jermichael Finley or David Thomas because, Mac's coached all those guys. And so KO is a guy that I felt really good about Texas early on, but I feel like North Carolina's nipping at the heels. And so that's one you're going to have to watch. And then after those two, I think it's not a drop, but I think that those are the two main ones Texas is kind of focused in on. And like I said, it's a 2 tight end class. And so it's going to be interesting with the first one drops, that first domino, that might tell us who could be the next guys. There's the kid from Jacksonville, the Bowl School in Jacksonville named Connor Cox. He visited unofficially, I believe, a couple of weeks ago. And he's the guy that they like at tight end as well. He actually is from Texas. He played at South Lake Carroll before he moved to Florida. And so there's a number of these guys that they're monitoring and looking at. And like I said, the first tight end to drop, I think, might tell us more about the next. I love where they are with Will Randall. I think Texas is the clear leader there. With KOA, I think they're still in a good position, but beware of North Carolina. Mac Brown's doing Mac Brown things.
And then over on defense, the fans are super curious about Gary Patterson's impact. So does Gary Patterson play a role in our recruiting?
Absolutely. Listen, Gary Patterson has a ton of skins on his wall. I mean, some of them might even be a Bevo hide as much as he's beaten the University of Texas. Gary Patterson still resonates with recruits, especially on the defensive side of the ball. The coaches and parents, they know how smart he is and what he's developed and what he's created and how good and his strong points when it comes to his schemes and finding fits and moving guys around. He'll take that 3A quarterback and turn him into an NFL safety. He'll take that 4A safety and turn him into an NFL linebacker. He's notorious for that kind of stuff. I still can't get used to the fact that he's recruiting for Texas. I never in this industry thought I would see that, but I think it's resonating. He had actually built some prior relationships with a lot of these guys, and he's still close to a lot of these Texas high school football coaches. So if someone wants to know if Gary Patterson is recruiting and making a difference at Texas already, yes, sir.
Yeah, man, it's a trip. He's with the Longhorns, but it's pretty awesome. And starting with defensive line, both the interior and edge, which names do we need to look out for?
That's where it begins on the line of scrimmage. DJ Hicks is the top guy in the state of Texas. He's a guy that he's still scheduled to see Texas for the spring game on April 23rd. But I still feel like Texas is trending away from him a little bit. I think Oklahoma has the lead there. I think A&M is a close second. He's got a really good relationship with the OU D-line coach, Todd Bates. He's gotten really close to Coach Terry Price at A&M. And that's not to say that Bo Davis and those guys haven't, done their best. If you talk to DJ or talk to his father, David, who's the D-line coach at Allen, they'll tell you how much Texas has been tremendous. And, they won't say a bad thing about anybody. They're really, really good people. And DJ's a really, really good kid. But right now, I feel like that's trending away from Texas a little bit. Nothing that a solid 2022 season couldn't change, couldn't flip. We've seen that, we've seen that happen with recruitments in the past. But Hicks is the main guy, and that's the guy that you want to try to get. And then you got Samu, that kid that was told you got to lose weight if you ever want to play football. And he comes from that factory at Humble at Tascasita, where those guys put O-line and D-linemen in college on a regular basis, from Kenyon Green to Sam Cosme to Cam Dewberry. I mean, they constantly have guys. And Samu's another guy, just plugger in the middle of the line. He looks like the nose tackle that the Baltimore Ravens always had in the 2000s with that zone blitz defense. He's just that guy that can eat up blockers. And so I think Texas is squarely in it with him as well. And then you talk about the new commit, Dylan Spencer. This is just a road dog. This is a guy that, once he takes his helmet off, he's peeing in the neighbor's yard. He's eating out of a can of Alpo. This is a guy that he's just a dog. And you want those guys on your team, especially on the defensive end and especially at the edge and the D-line positions. You want those guys that are hungry. And he's the guy that I think can get to the quarterback. And so getting him back on campus was cool. That was a commitment that kind of took everyone for surprise because he kind of popped out of nowhere. But some of these guys are grabbing their spots. They see these spots starting to fill up, and Dylan wanted to grab his, and so he went ahead and snagged that spot. One guy that people aren't talking about enough, and I think Texas fans need to learn more about, is Billy Walton. He comes from South Oak Cliff. He's a junior going into his senior year. He's an edge guy, 6'3", about 215, 220, maybe a little bit bigger than that. He was an integral part of the South Oak Cliff state championship team last season. He had 12 sacks, another 21 tackles for loss. I mean, he was active. This is a guy that Texas got on late last season, brought him in for a visit this weekend, and I really think they blew it away because Billy's not a guy that's taken a lot of trips. He likes Tennessee, he likes Oklahoma State, he likes SMU, and he likes Texas. He's got offers from other schools, but he's already kind of narrowed down who his focus is. And I think Texas really did a good job with him bringing him in. Now, he told me he's looking to commit really soon. He'd like to have it done before spring practice. That's 2 weeks away. And so now we have to gauge just how much interest is there on both sides, from him and from Texas. I think the Horns might want to take this guy. This is a guy that's incredibly strong, explosive. It just brings that edge mentality that you want, a guy that will get to the quarterback. And in this day and age, you've got to be able to stop the pass. And if you can't, you better damn sure be able to get to the quarterback. And so Texas is throwing their hands in the ring in some of these elite D-line guys and edge guys. And those are some of the names that you need to know going forward.
And linebacker is a big, big need for us, only landing one recruit last year. We just landed a commit a few days ago, so how are things shaping up there?
Well, let's give Samaje Burrell some love. I met him a while back, and I've watched him play. I watched him at camps, and I never imagined that kid could do a backflip, but he did. That's the type of athleticism he brings. He's actually more of your traditional type of linebacker. He's an inside guy. He's not going to get caught up in the wash. He's going to shoot gaps. He's going to track and smack. And this is a guy that canceled his Ohio State visit so that he could make a back-to-back trip to Austin, and went ahead and pulled the trigger and became a Horn and joined the third member of this 2023 class. He's a good kid, inside guy, like I said, and there's a ton of outside linebackers in high school these days. There's only a few true inside guys, and I think he is one of those guys. And so Texas has a guy that they can plug in the middle, that they know that can man the defense and play that Mike backer. One guy that came in this weekend was probably the most important recruit on campus was Anthony Hill Jr. He's the 5-star from Denton Ryan. This is a guy I've known for about 3 years. He's been recruited since he was a freshman in high school. You kind of always knew this was kid who was going to be the next one. I was fortunate enough to catch up with him and his father after their trip to Austin, and both came away impressed. Anthony's a lot like Jaden Greathouse. He wanted to see practice. He wanted to see how these guys play. He really wanted to see how they use the linebackers. And at one point, Anthony wanted to jump into the drill and start participating, but his father had to bring him back in. That's the kind of kid Anthony is. He's always smiling. He's always positive, and he is going to be a guiding light to any recruiting class he joins in any program he signs with. I think Texas did a good job, but this one is far from over. He's going to be at A&M soon. He's going to go see Miami in a couple weeks, and then he's going to wind up seeing USC sometime in June. And so you got a lot of schools in the mix there for Anthony, but getting him back on campus was big. Getting him around all the other recruits is big, but nothing was bigger than him watching the defense play defense, him getting to see the practice, the tempo, the intensity, and things of that sort. Anthony came away, he was happy. And I said, what's going to be the biggest factors for him, for you to when you decide? And he said championship culture. Culture was the first thing he mentioned. And I bet that stems from what they get at Denton Ryan, because those guys there give Coach Hennigan and Coach De La Torre and all those coaches a ton of credit. They have a winning culture there, and Anthony's only used to that. And so it only makes sense that that's kind of what he's striving for. Darian Gillette came the week before. He was at the Texas Relays. Now, he was unable to talk to the coaches this week, but then he popped in the middle of the week for a impromptu unofficial visit. Darian Gillette, and I was talking to Anthony Hill's dad about this last night. Those two guys run track. And I have to tell you, I've watched both of those guys run track, and it is different when you see a 6'3", 230-pound man running with tracksters, with track guys, with speed dudes. And that's what they're doing. I mean, it's tremendous. Darian Gillette might be one of the pound for pound, one of the best athletes in the country. You've seen his highlights on the football field. They go without saying. You've seen his highlights on the basketball court. Both his parents play college basketball. His dad is a basketball coach. You kind of see where that came from. Now he's running track. I said, why are you running track? He said, I want to compete. And that's what so many college coaches are looking for from track guys. They don't expect you to be dominant. They only expect you to compete. They don't want you sitting on the couch in the spring. They want you out there competing. And that's a big deal. Darian Gillette does that. And so him popping in impromptu was really big. His coach brought him in, and he was really happy and excited for what he got to see. And so linebacker position, it looks like it's going to be – Texas is setting themselves up to have a real nice linebacker class of 2023. I like where Texas is with Anthony Hill, but watch A&M. I like where they are with Darian Gillette, but watch Alabama. He just came back from that trip. And when I met Darian Gillette the first time, my first thought was that's what an Alabama linebacker looks like.
Finally, we can take a look at the secondary. Who are the key corner and safety prospects Texas is looking at right now?
Well, anytime you're talking about the secondary in Texas, you got to refer to DBU, and they're in on some pretty top guys right now. But I think the two top guys are Toviano and Matthews. Now, Toviano wasn't able to make it on this trip. He was supposed to come and be informally hosted by Travell Johnson, who's a 2022 linebacker signee for Texas that's also from Arlington Martin. Toviano wasn't able to make it. His ride fell through. I'm told it has nothing to do with Texas or no negative connotations to that. It's just the fact that he wasn't able to make it. And I think people need to realize, too, with a lot of these recruits, this is all on their dime right now. These are day trips. This gas is not cheap. Some of these people don't always have the resources to make these constant trips. And so when they do come in, you got to be a little more thankful and a little more blessed. I expect Toviano to reschedule and be back on campus. He had already been in late January. Last year I feel like Oklahoma was kind of in the lead, and then I feel like Alabama kind of took the lead when OU staff took off for Southern Cal. Now I feel like Texas has kind of jockeyed itself back up into that top conversation. He loves what Texas and those guys are doing. I think Ohio State's a school you might need to watch because he recognizes the amount of corners that program's been putting in the league lately, and for good reason. Tobiano is the best corner in the state. He's one of the best corners I've seen in the last 5 or 10 years. He's so aggressive. He's so physical. He's so athletic, so smart. He's going to play early and often, and he's going to go early in an NFL draft. That's just how good he is. And so get him rescheduled, get him back on campus. Texas still looks good there, but that's going to be a fist fight. Jordan Matthews, that's another one where, if LSU would have been more in the mix when Brian Kelly was hired, and they, the old staff had offered Matthews. His father played actually at LSU, Rashawn. And so there was some ties there. And when he started visiting Austin last summer, we kind of assumed, well, LSU's in the mix, and there's nothing harder than pulling a Louisiana prospect out of LSU's hands. And with Matthews, it feels like this new LSU staff has kind of backed off of him a little bit. Well, every ounce that they've backed off, Texas has pushed. Texas has solidified with him. You're our guy. We want to take maybe 2, possibly 3, but definitely 2 corners in this class. And Jordan Matthews has a spot. And he's a guy that he told me last night, he's looking at an early June or July commitment. He's got a few more spots he wants to visit, a few more places he wants to see. I think Texas A&M is actually strongly in the mix as well. And so I think that would wind up being a head-to-head if he does pick Austin. I like where Texas is with Jordan Matthews right now. Like I told you earlier, I don't do a lot of RPMs or crystal balls, but if I were to put one in for Matthews, it would be for Texas, and it would be with some confidence, because even before this last weekend, I felt like they were kind of the pace car, and now they only solidified that with this last trip. Jordan had a blast, and that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to have fun, and this was the 5th time Jordan Matthews and his family have made the journey to Austin from Baton Rouge since last June. 5 times in a year. That to me tells me more than any quote would ever note. It's the fact that their actions speak louder than their words. I love where Texas is with Jordan Matthews. He's a 6'6'1", 180-pound guy, long guy. Even at this point, if LSU jumped in the mix, I think Texas has started to separate from the pack for the most part, but you always have to be leery of those Bayou Bengals. But right now, I love where Texas is with Jordan Matthews. And then there's also Bravian Rogers, who I got to speak with last week at the Texas Relays. He's building a strong relationship with Steve Sarkisian, with Terry Joseph, with Blake Gideon, with Coach Kwiatkowski. I think that's a relationship. I feel like A&M's probably got a small edge there, and I think LSU has also got a little edge there. But the fact that Texas is in on a kid that's about 6 foot, 6'1", 180 pounds, ran an 11.000 for an outside cornerback, that's outstanding, especially with his length. There's some really, really good safeties in state. Guys like Dalton Brooks. Dalton Brooks, to me, looks like a guy that's going to play in the NFL one day. I also know that Dalton Brooks really likes Texas A&M. And so I know Notre Dame's making a push. I know Florida's making a push. Texas is trying to get him back on campus. They're trying to see him again. But at the end of the day, that one's trending away from Texas a little bit. I think they have a lot of work to do on Dalton. To me, Michael Harrison Pilot's the most important member. I think they're holding serve. This is a kid that has over 40 offers. This is a kid that has offers from Ivy League schools, from some of the top academic programs, from some of the best colleges in the country. I mean, there's not many places he couldn't choose to go. He took in Texas last Saturday before last, got to hang out with Arch Manning a little bit, talk to some of the coaches and recruits. Then he went out to California this last week and got to see University of Cal, and got to see Stanford as well. And he loved it. He said the weather was great. The scenery was even better. Michael is a great kid, but I still think Texas is the team to beat in that one. I think they've done a tremendous job. The fact that Blake Gideon and those guys are recruiting him as an athlete, because Michael Harrison Pilot does a lot of things really well. He doesn't just play safety. He plays wide receiver. He runs track. He plays an incredible center field in baseball. I mean, this is a multi-sport stud. And I think getting him back on campus last weekend was big. And with Harrison Pilot, he's going to drop a top schools list here pretty soon. I bet you could see something in the next few days, a top 10 or a top 12. And literally for a guy like him, he has to narrow it down because there's just so many schools, pushing for his service. I'm not real sure on the timeline. I still think that's going to be end of summer, beginning of fall kind of a decision look right now. But Texas and Harrison Pilot look really good. They've got proximity. They've got a few other factors that are helping them out as well. But with him, you got to stay the course because, like I said, he's highly intelligent. He's taking a very pragmatic approach to this recruiting process. And right now, I love where Texas is with him.
You're the man, Justin. Thank you for catching us up to speed on all the 23 players, and please tell us where we can find more of your updates.
Man, I really enjoyed it. Please come see us at InsideTexas.com, part of the On3 network. We're running a promotion right now, spring practice special, 4 months for $1. We're literally giving away the best content. Not to mention my man here, Texas Homer, who does the best when it comes to video content on YouTube. Please check us out. Check me out at Justin Wells 2424 on Twitter. Come see the staff. I mean, we got a crew over there. Come see us.
And that's a wrap on Justin Wells. Go sign up at Inside Texas to stay in the know as the cycle progresses. Thanks for hanging out. Watch some more of my videos here. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you want to support quality Texas content. As always, hook 'em.